I am Alen Stellian, the midlife empowerment coach and the founder of the Thrive membership for women 40 and over. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Melinda Kramer. Melinda had a long career in technology and the financial industry. She's now active in her neighborhood community and charity organizations. She has always had a passion for helping disadvantaged children. And while raised by a single mother who preached that life is not fair, she was right. Melinda believes all children deserve a fair chance in life. And Melinda, I just wanted to say a hearty welcome to you. I have been really looking forward to our conversation, the topic of which is embracing your transgender child, relative, or neighbor. So to get us started, Melinda, talk to us about transgender. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is out there. So could you please explain for the novice, what does transgender actually mean?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. I think that what we all need to understand in life is that we're all unique and that we're all born with certain gifts and certain traits and certain identities. And transgender just means that you were born into a body that you just do not identify as. And I think that it gets confusing because there are people who are non-binary, and there are, people who are gay or lesbian, and a lot of people get confused amongst all of this. But gay and lesbian and bisexual has to do with your sexuality, and transgender just has to do with your gender. And just like, you and I wake up every day, Helene, and we identify as female, and I'm sure the audience wakes up every day and they identify as whatever gender they identify as. Transgender people are actually people who are born into a body that they do not identify with. And this has been going on for as long as humans have been alive.
And I think that's really interesting because what I try to imagine is, what if tomorrow I woke up in a man's body,
Right.
and I consider myself female? I mean, how disorienting, how challenging, how, upsetting it would be to feel like what I'm presenting on the exterior to the world does not match how I feel inside.
Right. And there are so many stories, and I will post resources at the end for people who are interested in hearing more personal stories. And I'm happy to share mine with my daughter. People recognize their identity at different points in their life. There are young kids, 3 years old, that knew from out of the womb that they were in the wrong body, and the story Becoming Nicole comes to mind on that one. And then there are people who kind of fight it, right? It just, in my case, when I said to my daughter, how long have you felt this way? She said, I've always felt like something was wrong, and she went through a lot of depression and anxiety in her high school years, and she was battling with that. And she said, she didn't come out at that point, but she said, I tried to conform to this body, and I tried to be a male, but I just couldn't, and I was very unhappy. So I think that we all, kind of evolve and recognize who we are at different stages in life, but that this is something that happens to people, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, as much as sometimes I hear family members say, oh, it's so hard, and I get my pronouns, and I'm so, I can't, like, this is so difficult. I always think, if you feel like this is hard for you, imagine how it feels for this person, this person you love and care about,
Right.
to feel like they're living in the wrong body, to be judged so much by society, to show up every day in the struggle, trying to figure out how to live a life, that is at times painful, where they're not necessarily accepted by the majority of society.
Right. It takes incredible strength, when my daughter came out to us, we were shocked. We just didn't know. And I felt badly about that. But
how old was she?
She was 18.
Okay.
And hearing her talk about how she felt and then how she felt after making that decision to come out,
Mhm.
it's like, imagine being trapped in your house for 2 years like we've all been.
Right,
and
right.
then and then you suddenly get to go out and
Yeah.
be and live your life and be who you want to be. This is what transgender people are experiencing, but in a world that's just not welcoming and inclusive. So it's very hard. And when I was communicating this to various people, friends, family, etc., what a range of responses I got, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the young people are like, oh, cool, good for her, and immediately acknowledge her gender and move on. And and the more kind of conservative family members are like, well, what, why can't you just be gay? And it's like,
Right, right,
nothing
right.
to do with her
Right. Just
sexuality.
make it easier on us. That's just like this is too complicated.
Right. And but I think it just takes incredible strength, given the world that we live in, to be different at all. And then the most fundamental core of your being. It takes strength and it takes support. And it's just like, if somebody called you by the wrong name, you would just want to correct them just out of
Yeah.
respect. And so, yeah, it could take a little while to practice, getting the right name and the right pronouns. But, I said to her, well, what if I screw up? And she said, just correct yourself. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal, just like you would if somebody called you by the wrong name.
Yeah.
When you think about it that simply, it's just not a big deal.
Right. No, that's amazing. And I mean, I've got to imagine, I mean, has everybody in the family come around? I mean, what was the experience like in the transition like for everybody to, I don't know what your daughter's name is, but to be able to call your daughter by her name and her pronouns and, not just in the family, but her, I don't know if she's, gone off to school or like all of that. Like, how has that transition been from having this inside to really being able to say, this is who I am out in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think that it takes practice like anything, right? So, for the first, I don't know, 6 months or maybe even a year, we might have, used either the wrong name or the wrong pronoun now and then. And now it's been 2.5 years, nothing,
Wow. Yeah.
um, and I would say that, like, one of the things that's really hard as a parent or for anybody who's known the person for a really long time is trying to figure out how to separate that past presentation and person from this new person. So for example, I would be looking at all these old photos, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in those photos she looks like a boy, and she was like a really cute boy. And now I'm when I'm first looking at those after she came out, there's a little bit of kind of mourning, acceptance and mourning kind of all
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. It's like what you knew wasn't really who she was. And so now you've kind of got to rethink everything. But now it's been 2 years. I look back at those pictures and I just see her as she is now. Um, and of course, everybody's different and unique, and when and how they come out. But I would say family and kind of thought, oh, it'll be a phase, and
Right.
it was like, what, I feel like everybody knows somebody who's gay or lesbian. And so I would
Yeah.
say to my family members, you have gay friends, right? And they'd say, yeah. And I'd say, do you think those people chose to be gay? It chooses you,
Mm-hmm.
and we all just have to accept each other and and really support each other. So, but I can tell you that today I was chatting with my brother on the phone just about some, casual things. And then, he made some comment about, we need more regulations in life. And I said, I said, well, yeah, have you seen all the regulations coming out about transgender people not
Mm-hmm.
being able to, like, play sports or anything. I said, name me one transgender person that's like won an Olympic medal or has harmed somebody. And he's like, I don't know about that stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it just really varies, and you're going to find people that just don't understand it, or they're hearing snippets in the press or online, and there's just a lot of fear. And I think that fear creates, a lot of misinformation, but that's why I wanted to talk today, because these are real people, real humans. There are, thousands and thousands of them in history, and we just don't pay attention because they're busy living their lives and just being authentic people.
Right. Yeah. We could all strive to be more authentic, right? To who we really are, and to have the courage to put that out in the world. And so many of us are hiding our true selves. And maybe it's not in the same way, that, in terms of our gender identity, but maybe it's in a different way. And so it does take courage to show up truly as yourself, and to even get in touch, to really understand. Like you said, your daughter knew something felt off, and maybe at first she didn't really understand what it was, and it came to her later, but the thought that somebody else has imposed this on you. I mean, who would want this, right? Who would want to show up in the world, in a world that doesn't accept you?
Right.
Who would want to, do you think people choose to this? I mean, the courage it takes to show up as yourself when you know the world is not an accepting place.
Yeah. Incredible strength. Right.
Incredible strength. And I think there's, help us understand what are the things people do not, like some of the common misunderstandings. Like, for one, I would think right away, transvestite. Like, what's the difference between transvestite, transgender? Like, like she just likes to put on girls' clothes. It's very fundamentally different.
Yeah. And there has been a lot of language evolution over time, right? And so it can be confusing between transvestite, transsexual, transgender. But the reality is there are men who like to dress up as women, and we now have a whole industry around that with RuPaul and the drag show, and that's entertainment, and that's
So
what
they still identify as their gender as men. They just
Mhm.
enjoy dressing up as women and maybe even performing as women. So that's very different than somebody who feels like this is not the body I was meant to be in.
Exactly. And for those who are truly transgender, what they need to do is, they need to present as the gender they identify as. And presenting can be very challenging for people. And there's a difference between presenting and passing, right? And so for people who are transgender, depending on what age they are, what their genetics is, if they're young people, young kids, pre-puberty, they can present as another gender, and that still may involve some binding of the male genitals if it's a transgender girl, but once you get older and past puberty and you decide to come out, it is a lot of work to present yourself every day. So if you're a transgender female, you have to shave your entire body. You have to bind. And this is even if you've been taking hormones for years and years, right? That is still something you have to deal with and reckon with every day. And I remember probably a year after our daughter came out and she was home, and we were just in the kitchen one day, and I said, let's go rock climbing, like, let's go right now. And she just looked at me and she said, Mom, it takes me an hour
Wow.
to get ready to present to the world. I can't just.
Right.
And, and this is me, I'm on that journey with her, and I'm learning these things,
Right.
every day. And she's blonde and fair, and she passes as female. So she's one of the lucky ones. But,
Right.
I think we see people maybe out and about that look like they're men, and they might be dressing as women. So here's the difference between the transsexual. but they're trying to present as women, but they may not have come out soon enough. And so
Right.
they may still have to be shaving, and they may have dark hair and have to wear a lot of makeup to hide that. So I would just urge people to be respectful and kind. And if you're unsure, you can say, what's your preferred name or gender, or, just like you would if you were meeting someone else.
And so in terms of the questions that, how do you feel, how does the transgender community feel about being asked, oh, are you taking hormones? Are you going to do the surgery? Like, that feels very invasive of a question to ask, but I know that I don't know. I assume that is a very common question that your daughter gets, especially given that she kind of, came into her own identity later in life after puberty.
Yeah, I asked that question. So, when she came out to me, she had already seen doctors, seen mental health professionals, and started hormones, right? Because once you're 18, you're in control. So we didn't have any input to that, but I did have a lot of questions, and I learned a lot. And, it takes quite a while, and it varies per person for the hormones to be effective. And everybody's different. Some people want to get surgery, some don't. I think that the good rule of thumb is, don't ask a transgender person something that you wouldn't ask, somebody else, right? I mean, it's
Makes sense.
If it's that personal that
Right.
you ask somebody
Right.
else, don't ask them, and
like, are you doing hormone replacement therapy just, in menopause, or that's not even as invasive, but that's an example of, I'm not sure you would ask somebody,
yeah,
especially somebody you don't know very well.
yeah. I mean, it's the same. And, I think if you're, a caring, family member, yeah, sure, you can have those discussions. I mean, I feel like we've had way more in-depth and personal discussions as a result of all this than we ever would have. But that's good. That's good for us.
Yeah.
But I know, people are often curious when it's something they don't understand. And I think it's also okay to say, can I ask you a question? And, if you're close with that person, then they may be comfortable talking to you, but, not a random stranger.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the it's, I don't know how much you're seeing a change generationally, where is it that, well, in our parents' age, they were just getting used to people being gay or lesbian. And now is this the next, iteration, where now for our generation, it's going to be maybe similar to theirs, where, oh, this is new. We need to, it's not, probably not new, but newly out, right? More out in the world, more in front of our faces, that this is going to be our generation's call to acceptance of a different, experience for people.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see a huge difference between, the younger generation's reactions and response to all this than, let's say our generation, assuming we're all over 40 here.
Yes.
And I think, though, that it does vary just based on, kind of how you were raised and what information you had access to, and, what you learned along the way. So I think, here's a little anecdote that's kind of interesting. Years ago, because my daughter was in the children's choir here in Chicago, and I had some girlfriends, all of us over 40, that were going to see this, concert up at Ravinia. And afterwards, we all got in the car and, all excited into the concert. And one of my girlfriends asked my daughter, what was that boy that was wearing makeup? Was he or she? And my daughter, and this is years before she came out, my daughter said, "What does it matter? Like, why do you need to label everybody?" And And I think that is part of the challenge that the younger generation doesn't have. They're not caught up in labels.
Mhm.
But I do think it varies, kind of where you live and what you're taught, and how kind of, kind of inclusive or narrow your world is. And that we focus on labels as a society. It's just, kind of part of this long, um, human instinct that we've had. And it affects everything we do, right? We want to box everybody into,
Yeah.
black, white, brown,
Right.
Hispanic. I mean, it just doesn't matter. And I think until we, get to a generation where it's just more about, where do we have things in common, and how do we all operate together, we'll be in this. And as my son often says to me, I just can't wait for your generation to die so we can fix this mess. And
I get it.
he
I
means
mean,
it.
yeah. And so, I mean, one of the huge concerns, and more than concern, I have, is the rate of depression and suicidality among transgender people. And I, wonder if you've seen that, whether, with your daughter or in the community, because, I know it's prevalent, and I understand it. I mean, given the the lack of acceptance and the feeling the otherness feeling that you have, right?
Right. I mean, it's just not surprising when you think about it from the perspective of, how we are as a society, right? We all struggle with our body images,
Mhm.
right? We're all so hard on ourselves as it is, and especially, young people, but really all of us, what we're kind of taught to attain versus how we learn to just love ourselves for who we are is a huge gap. So with transgender people, it's even harder because, there's a lot of fear, anxiety, self-loathing. Why me? What do I do? And then, even if you can learn to accept yourself for who you are, you have this really difficult road ahead, and it's hard. And if you don't have allies and support and safe spaces, it's even harder. And just simple things about getting up and getting dressed and going to the bathroom, and everything is just hard, right? So there are a lot of medical and mental health professionals who do surveys and provide services across the world. This is not just a US thing. So there's a lot of data, and the reality is that everybody needs to find support, and not everybody can. And not everybody's accepted, and some people are abused or bullied or beaten. If you look at the data on the number of Black transgender women that are murdered every year, it's just outrageous. So it's very hard for people who are transgender to live a fulfilling, happy, stable life because of what's against them. But the data does support that, affirming healthcare is key. And I know even in Chicago with, agencies that I've worked with here that support homeless teens, a lot of them have left home because they are LGBTQ and unsupported, and that they've been abused because of who they are. And for some people, they can get the help they need to correct and live a healthy life. And for other people, life just becomes too much. And it's just crazy sad.
So sad. Oh. And it's interesting because, as I mentioned before we started recording, I have a nephew who's transgender, and it was interesting because I wonder if that's what you see also, is when it hits you closer to home is when suddenly you are curious, want to get educated, are accepting, you see the struggle, you see this is somebody I love and I want to support. But, until then, I mean, I'll admit, I don't, I didn't know much about it. Wouldn't have thought of myself as an ally. I mean, I wasn't even very well educated about this. And I'm just getting educated now because this is fairly recent. But I guess I wonder, in your case and in what you see, I guess we can hope for a day when everybody, in addition to having a gay or lesbian friend, also has a transgender friend, and then it's more common, acceptable, like, not as big of a deal, right?
Right. And yeah, I had a similar situation where I had a good friend who has a transgender daughter. And in fact, in our book club years ago, we read Becoming Nicole, and we all felt like, wow, that was really helpful, good education. But I still didn't recognize it in my own daughter. I still didn't see it coming. I think it does need to be a little bit more up close, but that's part of the reason, that I volunteered for this. And that ever since, my daughter came out, I've been trying to normalize the conversation. And I tell everybody, just because, everybody does have a gay friend, maybe everybody has a transgender friend, right? Or they know somebody, and it's true. I'll be on a random golf course, in Colorado with, two guys that just got paired up with my girlfriend and I, and, after about 6 holes, people start asking,
Right.
and if you have kids, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, yeah, I have 2. I have a transgender daughter. And one of the guys will go, oh yeah, my brother has a transgender child. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah.
People haven't been talking about it. So we do all need to normalize it and be more open. But to your point, it's hard to really learn about it unless you need to. Everybody's busy. But
Yeah.
I think if we can all just be a little bit more aware that there are resources out there and that there's a vast population of transgender people. I mean, look at Amy Schneider on Jeopardy. I mean,
Mhm.
they're out there, and they're just normal people who have a much tougher life, and they're
Yeah.
not hurting anybody, and they just need respect and care.
So maybe this is your message to everybody. Is there, what do you really want people to know? And what are some ways for people to educate themselves about this, who are saying, wow, okay, yeah, I really don't know enough about this. How can I educate myself?
Yeah, I guess I would say that the first thing to realize is that everything you hear is not true, right? And that right now, unfortunately, there is a lot of political effort to rally the base around fear of trans people, whether it's just using a bathroom or playing sports or whatever. And so you need to know that, like anything, you got to get the whole story, and you got to do your own research. And so all the people that are uneducated and feel like they don't have time, okay, I get it. But if you can just recognize that we're all human beings, and that we all need allies. This is right now probably one of the most vulnerable groups in our
Mhm.
society is transgender people. And they need us to get educated, and they need us to speak up when appropriate, and not just fall prey to, some of the political theater that's going on right now. I applaud the Idaho governor, because after, the legislature came to him with this, let's ban trans kids from sports, he said, I need data, I need evidence to support this. And so we should all be looking to our own medical professionals and mental health professionals, and doing our own research before we take a position.
And if we don't, if we aren't going to, I mean, the danger is going to Google, right? And just because you could get a whole bunch of stuff. So I know you're going to put some resources that you feel are credible, that are credible, into the comments on this live, because I think that's going to be really important to vet some of those for people, so they don't have to just go and find their own, which could be helpful or not helpful. So, and honestly, I think putting a human face on this, putting this, I'm hoping some of the resources have real people's stories of this, so that it's not this thing, this label, this thing out there. It's just real people with real lives and families who some may be accepting and not, and who may feel alienated from society. And, what's the best way to be an ally to transgender people? I mean, we talk about the importance of allyship, and how can the average person just, they can educate themselves. And like you said, if they come across somebody, be kind to them. I mean, is there anything else we can do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those two things are critical. I think, allies speak up as well. That does require you to be a little educated,
Yep.
There are lots of organizations that support transgender people in your community, and, you can get involved there. And you can learn more and be supportive. There are lots of young people out there that need, financial support in order to present, or to find housing, or, they're just, if you reach out to organizations that support people, I think that's probably the easiest, safest way. But I would say bring up the dialogue, talk about the dialogue, just try to normalize it for everybody, and eliminate the fear. And I think that, it will be a safer world for everybody if we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know my parents, for example, who are still alive, and have seen my nephews struggle. I think they are, and I have a sister who's gay, and I remember when she came out, the fear is around the heart, that she was going to have such a harder life, right? And it is harder for anybody who's not exactly, the white male, privileged in our society, who's straight, etc. So, but now I see the same fear.
Yeah.
And it's not unfounded. I mean, because that it is a harder life that these transgender people face, but it's and they're very good about not transmitting that fear to our nephew. But I try to figure out like how to respond to that, and I mean, one of my responses has been, but he's alive.
Right.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. He's alive. Like he's, because it can be bad, it could be really, really, he's still living.
Yeah, no. And that's key, is just being supportive, and everybody needs love and support. One of the things for transgender people is that they don't really have any good dating options. Right. Think about how hard it is.
Yes.
Everybody to find a significant other that can just hug you and make you feel loved. And that's a really hard journey, because, unless you have surgery, you are just not who you are presenting as, and you are very fearful, and it is dangerous. Right. So you don't have the same opportunities for human connection in all the same ways that cisgender people have. And that's really hard.
Yeah. Well, I want to close by asking you how your daughter's doing today. Like, what is, it's been 2.5 years since she came out. I guess that's the correct language because I think you used it during this conversation. I don't know. As transgender, and I wonder how how her journey has been since.
Yeah, I think it's been up and down. I think that, like, I referred to the honeymoon phase when you first come out and it's exciting, and then you realize, like, this is a lifelong effort
Right,
every
right.
day. And that can be stressful. But she's committed to transitioning all the way. She wants to get surgery. She's still trying to, figure out college. And she's happy that she is, who she is now. And she's able to live her, authentic way. And she and I, are closer than we've ever been. And so I think that, what we've talked about and what I've learned is that, there's no straight path. It's not a narrow road, it's wide, and it may have, some different twists and turns, but as long as she's able to be healthy, happy, and authentic, we'll get there eventually.
I love that. I mean, it is a lifelong journey. It's not,
Yeah.
there's not, an end point. I mean, this is going to be a journey for her to really continue to come into her own and show up authentically. And, hopefully do what she needs to do to make it a little easier for her to show up every day in public, because I can't imagine, having to do that kind of work and to struggle so much just to be able to go outside and present to the world
Yeah.
in a way that makes you feel like you're showing up as your real self.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that, she just started some electrolysis, and she told me that the technician had no idea she was trans, so, if you were
Yeah,
to, if anybody were to see her, on the street, you would never know.
yeah,
But she's still living with that other part of her that she has to deal with every
yeah,
day. It's
yeah.
hard.
That is hard. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for educating us and for sharing so openly about your and your daughter's journey. I really, really appreciate it. I think it is such a gift to us. So, and I know that, your message to everybody is to learn and to share all about, the journey and the challenge for transgender people and how to become a better ally. And I want everybody to look for the resources that Melinda will put for us in the comments so that we can get better educated and become allies to the transgender population. So thank you, and really appreciate you being here. And thank you everybody for joining us and for watching. Please comment, let us know what you learned and your thoughts on this. We would really appreciate it. We've got Anne Marie and Melanie also showed up today and are both sending you big thanks. So you'll see their comments, and I'm sure many more. So appreciate you.
Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them at a future time. Thanks.
Yes, and please put questions in the comments, and Melinda will be there to answer them. All right, for now, I'm going to say goodbye. And
Bye.
bye.